They call it pink gold. Potash is a vital ingredient for growing food, and Canada has more of it than anywhere else in the world, with the largest reserves and production volume.
They call it pink gold, the unsung treasure that quietly feeds the planet. Potash, the mineral hidden deep beneath the Canadian prairies, has become the cornerstone of modern agriculture. For decades, it has fueled the world's harvests, helping corn, wheat, and soybeans grow strong. But in 2025, this silent mineral stepped out of obscurity and into the center of a storm. What was once a topic for geologists and agronomists suddenly turned into a weapon in a global trade war, as the United States slapped a 35% tariff on Canadian potash imports. A resource that rarely made headlines became the front line of a political and economic confrontation no one saw coming. The impact was instant and brutal. Within days of Washington's announcement, fertilizer prices surged. The price of potash, once stable around $300 a ton, shot up by more than 10%. Farmers across the Midwest felt the blow. Every acre of corn, soybean, and wheat suddenly cost more to cultivate. For the men and women who feed America, this wasn't an abstract policy change. It was a gut punch to their livelihoods. By spring, production costs had soared, profit margins vanished, and rural communities from Iowa to Kansas found themselves staring down a financial drought that no amount of rain could fix. For years, the U.S. had relied on Canada for nearly 90% of its potash supply. Domestic output met barely a fraction of demand, only 400,000 tons against a need for more than 5 million. That dependency had always been brushed aside, tolerated as part of the global marketplace. But now, the numbers painted a harsh reality. Without Canada, the soil itself was at risk. Fertility dropped, yields fell, and with it came a surge in food prices that touched every household. What began as a protective measure for American industries was fast turning into a national agricultural crisis. In the heart of the Midwest, frustration turned to fury. Farmers, long accustomed to battling floods, droughts, and fluctuating markets, now faced a new man-made disaster. The National Farmers Union issued a rare public rebuke, calling the tariff a mistake that would haunt the nation's food security. By late summer, fertilizer costs accounted for nearly 7% of all farm expenses, a number that meant survival or bankruptcy for countless small operations. Behind every statistic was a story: family farms teetering on the edge, generations of work threatened, and a way of life slipping through calloused hands. While American farmers protested, Canada chose silence and strategy. Ottawa didn't retaliate with tariffs or rhetoric. Instead, it fortified. Through careful planning, Canada began stockpiling potash reserves, expanding export quotas, and investing nearly $400 million in new infrastructure. Saskatchewan, already the heart of the world's potash production, became a fortress of resource security. Storage facilities multiplied. Backup systems were built. In just months, Canada could supply its domestic needs for 2 full growing seasons without importing a single grain from abroad. This wasn't reaction, it was reinvention. By mid-2025, the Canadian potash industry wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Mines reopened, new jobs appeared, and small prairie towns roared back to life. Over 1,500 new positions were created as investment poured in. Potash had transformed from a background commodity into a pillar of national strength. Canada's measured restraint turned into an advantage, transforming its resource into a diplomatic powerhouse. The country wasn't just selling minerals anymore, it was exporting stability. The world had started to take notice. From Ottawa's quiet boardrooms to the bustling markets of Asia, the shift was unmistakable. Canada struck major fertilizer deals with India, and long-term export contracts with China, two nations whose food security depends on consistent agricultural inputs. Europe followed suit. Governments from Germany to the Netherlands reached out to Canadian officials, eager to lock in reliable supply lines as food inflation rattled their economies. Even Japan, long dependent on U.S. imports, turned northward in search of assurance. Every handshake, every contract, every deal told the same story. Canada was rewriting the rules of global food security. The shockwaves didn't stop overseas. Mexico, historically tied to U.S. trade policy, began rethinking its alliances. Dependence on Washington's unpredictable economic strategies had become too risky. Turning toward Canadian suppliers offered a path to stability and independence. Across the hemisphere, nations started treating fertilizers not as commodities, but as instruments of sovereignty. The potash trade, once an obscure sector, now carried the weight of national survival. By the end of 2025, the G20 had declared fertilizers a strategic resource, placing them alongside oil and natural gas in global importance. And at the center of this new hierarchy stood Canada, home to nearly 40% of the world's potash supply. Investors who once chased oil and tech stocks now rushed toward fertilizer companies. Toronto emerged as a new financial hub for resource trading. Saskatchewan's mines expanded, processing plants modernized, and entire towns flourished again. Potash was no longer a quiet export. It was the lifeblood of a new economic era. Canada had become, in every sense, the OPEC of agriculture. South of the border, the contrast was stark. U.S. potash prices had risen nearly $100 per ton, squeezing farmers and inflating grocery bills. Food costs climbed. Household budgets shrank. What began as a policy to protect American agriculture had backfired, leaving families to shoulder the burden. Meanwhile, Canada stood stronger than ever, its once overlooked mineral now the key to feeding a hungry world. The age of pink gold had arrived, and as nations scramble to secure their place in a volatile global market, one truth echoes louder than ever. In the battle for food security, the power lies not in the soil above, but in the minerals buried deep below.